Okay, so we are here with Genetica, and
Yeah,
we'll see if our clicker's working here.
it should work just fine. So I'm Andrew Summerfield. I'm with both Summerfield Advertising, where we help brands become beautiful both inside and out, and with Genetica, where science meets its moment.
And I'm Laura Cree. I am a science communicator and a marketing strategist, and I've spent about the last 16 years working with companies in science, technology, manufacturing, education, and I'm really thrilled to be here with Genetica now.
So I want to give you just a little history lesson on myself, which is really the why of Genetica. I was born and raised in the state up north. Came down here, good old Flint, Michigan. You may have heard of that, the water capital of the world. Came down here, couldn't get away fast enough. So it seems like I was somewhat escaping something to come down to CCAD to be the next Jackson Pollock. Graduated there and I got hired on with a gentleman that started his agency. I had long hair, I wore hoodies, I was covered in paint. He made me cut my hair, he put a suit on me. I did that for 6 years, but I learned really everything that I could about advertising, strategic marketing. And at that point, I felt like I learned everything I could from this man. I need to move on. I looked at film school out in LA, and my wife says, well, where can I have our second kid? I said, okay, well, we're not moving to LA. That's Sophia Summerfield right back there. And I said, I'm gonna either look for a job or I'm gonna hang my own shingle. And I started Summerfield Advertising 22 years ago. Pivoted into doing brand strategies design for a lot of companies, from the larger, the DSW, Victoria's Secret, local companies like Porter Wright, you name it, it spread the gamut. Was very fortunate to work with Artie here when Sbarro decided to go off mall and they wanted to do standalone. We helped put their campaign together. This guy's a genius. Talk about a storyteller. So I was working with Artie on that. During the COVID time, and we're at home, it gave you permission to stop, breathe maybe a little bit and think, what do I really want to do? Right? I spent my first few years climbing up a mountain at Summerfield, not really home, seeing my kids grow. I didn't want to do that again. I spent a lot of years falling forward down the mountain at Summerfield, and I said, I really need to figure out what I want to do. So I looked around me, I looked at what was the best opportunity, what is exciting around here. It was life sciences and biotech. I had the fortunate good faith of working with a gentleman here, a few folks that had their finger on the pulse and was really the head of the spear that was trying to put our region on the map for what they were doing. We didn't want to be just a flyover from the Bay Area to Boston. There was so much innovation happening here. How can we help bring more money here and help these innovators? And that's why we established Genetica Creative. So it's still the brand strategy design, heavy in the storytelling, but biotech, life sciences, the human, study the human aspect of the biotech and life science, and med device as well. So that's what we're doing here at Genetica. That's why we exist.
Yeah. So we're here today to talk about story. And why story? That's something we think about a lot at Genetica, because the clients that we work with tend to be in areas that are highly regulated, have a lot of complex science they need to communicate, have a lot of data and evidence. And that data and evidence, of course, is absolutely critical. You cannot get a new biotherapy through FDA approval without a lot of data. You cannot convince a clinician to prescribe a medical device or a patient to accept it without the evidence. But data and evidence alone are not enough. Before people will accept your data and your evidence, they need to know your story. So that's what we're here to talk about today. This is especially critical when you leave the world of academia and you enter the world of pitch decks and websites and brochures and patient communication. We need to be able to articulate that story in a way that our audience is ready to receive it. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about why story. We're going to get into some neuroscience and geek out about that for a little bit. Then we're going to talk about storycraft and science and give you just a couple of key tools that you can use to help find your story. And this is where I will be picking on some of you. And then from story to brand, Andrew is going to show us how we take that core story and turn it into a brand system so that we are communicating clearly and consistently across all of our stakeholders, across all of our touch points, and at every stage of the life cycle for our company. Now, we have geared this talk today around scientific storytelling, but this actually applies much more broadly. So if you are not in the life sciences, don't worry, there's plenty for you here as well. These are actually very fundamental storytelling techniques that matter no matter what you're trying to communicate, but especially when you're trying to communicate something that's complex. So let's get into it. Before we do, though, I want to tell you a little bit about a campaign that we worked on last year. We had the privilege of working with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation here in the Midwest on their 2025 Match campaign. These are great people doing a lot of fantastic work on behalf of people with cystic fibrosis and their families. So let me tell you a little bit about cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis is a disease that is caused by mutation in the CTFR gene, and it impacts about 100,000 people in the world today, about 40,000 people here in the United States. And let's see here. Oh, there we go. So fairly small population. Actually, it's a fairly rare disease, which makes finding cures difficult because there is not the money behind it. However, now I'm losing you, aren't I? So let me start again. I want you to meet somebody. I want you to meet Emily. Emily is a young lady that we had the very great privilege of meeting as part of this Match campaign. She was diagnosed with CF when she was 3 years old, as many young children with CF. That's about the time a lot of them are diagnosed. She'd had a number of lung infections in and out of the hospitals. At the time that her parents got that diagnosis of cystic fibrosis, the life expectancy for a child born with CF was less than 30 years. So she had a lot of invasive treatments, a lot of time in and out of hospitals. And when she was 4, her doctor prescribed a vest that would be a treatment to help break up the mucus in her chest and help her breathe better. Her father told me that they got a letter from the insurance company denying the treatment and saying that they would reconsider when Emily turned 10 if she lived that long. Now, those of you who are parents or can imagine being a parent, I want you to think about how that felt to get that letter as a parent, if she lived that long. Now, I'm happy to tell you she did. And at 14, she received a transformative treatment. It was the first of the CTFR modulator treatments that allows her body to process fluid better and allows her to breathe better. And today, she is 28 years old. At the time that we met her, it was the week before her wedding to Garrett, the love of her life. They love to travel the world together. She's a 3rd grade teacher. She is living a life that she and her parents never thought they would be able to have, thanks to an innovation. However, those CTFR modulators that are on the market right now do not work for every single person with CF. There are still thousands of people with CF who are waiting for a treatment that works for their mutation. And that's why it's so important to continue the work of the CF Foundation. Now, when you go home tonight, I can pretty much guarantee you are not going to remember a single stat that I gave you at the very beginning of this talk. You will remember Emily. You'll remember her story. Story is so important because data tells us what's true, but story tells us why it matters. And until you have that why, until you know why the information matters, your brain is not ready to receive it. So now that you know a little bit about Emily, I could tell you more about CF, and you're in a better position to care about it, to remember it, to want to go and find out more information about it. That's the power of story. So why story, though? What is it about story that's so magical? As human beings, story is absolutely foundational to who we are as a species. Story goes back millennia, far before we had any kind of written language. Many researchers believe that some kind of story thinking and communication was fundamental even before we had complex oral language. People have been sitting in caves and sitting around campfires telling stories to each other for millennia. And it is foundational to every single human society and culture. So every time a baby is born, we start telling stories to that baby the minute it's born. And the minute our children can learn to talk and use language, they start telling stories back to us. And even in the modern world, we spend most of our days surrounded by story, no matter what it is that we do. We wake up in the morning and we check the news and we read or listen to stories about other people doing other things. Some of those things make us very angry. We care about them. When we're at work or sitting at the bar with a couple of beers, we like to talk about people we know. We gossip. Gossip is fundamental to every human culture too. And most of us spend a lot of our lives immersed in stories about people who don't even exist. So we care about fictional people and movies and television shows and books. Even at night, our brains are so addicted to story that we tell ourselves stories in our dreams. But why? What is it about story? The secret is, story is a survival technology. It's not just a method of communication, it's a method of thinking. Story is how we make sense of complex information. It's how we understand cause and effect and how sequences of events are related to each other. It's how we determine the meaning and importance of what we hear and the information we receive. And it just reduces the cognitive load of understanding the world around us. Story helps us decide what we pay attention to, what goes into our memory, and what we want to take action on. So the thing I want you to understand is that story is not just a communication technique. It is actually a fundamental way of thinking, and it's the most natural way humans think. Scientific method, data analysis, all of that is very important. We would not have the modern world we have today without all of that. But analytical thinking, logical thinking, is not innate in the way that story thinking is. So when you give people information in the form of story, you give them information in a form that they're ready to receive. So when you think about story as survival technology, it makes sense when we think about what's important then, what we pay attention to. Primarily people. There is more of our conscious brain devoted to social information than anything else. And that makes sense because we're a cooperative species. Our survival depends on the cooperation of everybody around us. So we pay attention to information about people. That's why a story about somebody like Emily is more interesting and sticks in your memory longer than a bunch of unrelated facts about a disease. We're primed to notice change and novelty. So when something changes in our environment, again, it's survival. I have to decide right now, is that a threat? Is it an opportunity? Is it neutral? Can I ignore it? So we're always on the lookout for something that's new and different. Cause and effect or problem solution thinking. This is the core of story thinking right here. Because again, this is the purpose of story. You know, Grog ate that mushroom, Grog died. Maybe I should not eat that mushroom. That is story thinking right there. It's also how we look into the past and understand what has happened and how we predict the future and create creative problems or creative solutions, sometimes creative problems too. And finally, emotion is really critical to all story as well. Emotion is actually another form of cognition, and it's foundational to how we make decisions. So again, we like to think of ourselves as logical, rational beings who gather all the evidence and then make a decision. But the cognitive research actually proves the decision is made on emotion, always. In fact, people whose brains are damaged in a way that they cannot have access emotion can't even make a decision on what to have for dinner that night. It's that foundational. So emotion actually comes first, and then we back up that decision with our data and evidence. So some of you may be asking now, okay, but what is story? And there's a lot of different theories, but most of them coalesce around something like this. You've got 5 elements. You have an agent, somebody who is making decisions and taking action. You have a goal, something they want to achieve. They have a conflict or challenge that keeps them from getting that goal. There is some kind of progression or change over time, a sequence of events that's connected and a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there's some kind of stakes or consequences that make us want to care about it. Now, this all kind of sums up to what we call the hero's journey. So think about Star Wars, Wizard of Oz, all of those are hero's journey type of stories. But that doesn't mean we have to write War and Peace every time we want to tell a story. Especially in the marketing world, you can tell a whole story in a paragraph, in a couple sentences, in a headline, sometimes in a single image. This image has all of the elements of story in it right now. We can see the goal, we can see the challenge that he's overcome, we can see the protagonist. And now, thanks to this story, this simple visual story, I suddenly care a little more about precision ceramic components.
Bless you.
So let's get into the storycraft piece. There is a lot to say around storycraft and narrative science and cognitive science and how it all comes together. We could geek out on that for days. In fact, I would actually love to because I am that kind of nerd. But today we only have time to talk about a couple key things. And what we wanted to give you is just a couple tools to help you find the heart of your story. Now, the first tool that we're going to give you is going to be called the value shift. And this actually comes from Storynomics by Robert McKee. And these sources will be at the end, so we'll also have a QR code where you can go and see where our sources are and gather some tools. So you can look for that. It's actually on these cards, and it will also be on the presentation. So don't panic about taking notes. We do have that for you. Value shift is the change in emotional value that your story produces. And again, remember that emotion is foundational to making decisions and to caring about the story. So every story should have some type of value shift. In Emily's story up front, that value shift is very clear. We go from despair to hope. And if you are also in the business of making life-saving biotechnology innovations, that may be your value shift as well. Nobody says your value shift has to be unique only to you. It just has to be true to what you do. If you are in a business that does not have those kinds of stakes, though, you still do have a value shift. At Genetica, we take people from complexity to clarity. If you are State Farm Insurance, you may be taking people from anxiety to security. If you're a business coach, maybe you're taking people from self-doubt to confidence. There's always some kind of value shift. And if you understand what your value shift is, that tells you what kind of story you're telling. That doesn't mean that we use the words necessarily. State Farm Insurance never says, we are taking you from anxiety to security. But that value shift is underneath every single advertisement, every single brochure, every single touch point of communication. That's what they're selling. So when you can find the emotion behind what you're selling or what you're proposing, that's going to make your story much more valuable. And now, I'm going to challenge you to try this. So I'd like you to pair up, talk to 1 or 2 people beside you, introduce yourself again, tell them what you do, and see if together you can help each other figure out what your particular value shift is. And if you're having trouble, we have some prompts here, to help you think about what that value shift is. So we're going to give you 2 or 3 minutes here. All right, so engage. How many of you found your value shift? You got a few of you? A few of you? Okay. Let's share. What, you said you have your value shift over here, Vince? Do we have a mic?
Okay. Could you pass this down, please? It'll be in stereo.
Two
Double mic.
mics is great.
Yeah, so I work with different companies, all sizes, and I think for me, just telling that story about how we can affect their business, help them grow, and I always feel I'm part of that company. When I talk to people in emails, I typically say, hey, we should do this, because I feel like my success is if they're happy and they can grow their business and that type of thing, because then they'll be my customers still.
So what is the shift in value that you have then? You're going from what to what?
Shift in value is, I guess, talking about how, we're not just selling them something, right? We're not just selling them broadcast television or digital television or marketing, anything like that. It's like we're becoming kind of part of that team.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to challenge you a little more to think in terms of human emotion. Where are they? What's their start point? Are they uncertain? Where are they? And where do you take them? So that might be from uncertainty to certainty in terms of what their strategy is. So that's what we're looking for with the value shift, is actually what is the human emotion that is shifting underneath the story. So who else might have a value shift?
Jackie.
Jackie.
So I say that I help teams move from friction to flow.
Ooh, nice.
Now, if we want to bring it to more emotions, it's from frustration to ease and happiness and making it simple and, oh my God, let's get results. Like, let's win together, stuff like that.
Even better. I love that. We got one more?
So I decided that change matters in their life or work based off of the energetic loops that they have open, right? So, or closed off, blocked, if you will. So basically, if an individual client comes to me, we're able to identify those areas that need support, and we can help them move through those blockages in order to close those energetic loops that no longer serve their life or their work.
Okay, so what is the shift in value then that we have here?
Take them from being closed off or blocked and basically give them a place to enter into renewal and rejoice in the way that they're feeling and get back to their normal lives.
So that sounds to me like we are going from frustration to joy.
Right, fear to joy even.
Yes, that is a fantastic value shift. So yeah, I think that's the important thing to remember on the value shift, is that we are talking about the emotion behind what you do. So it's not we do this. It is what emotion are they starting from and where do they end up? That's the value shift. Now, we're going to shift from talking about emotion to talking about structure. So structure is something that becomes very important in narrative because this impacts how the brain receives information. If we just have a bunch of random facts that we are pulling out, like I did to you at the very beginning, that information does not hook into our memory. We need something that has a formal structure, again, that beginning, middle, end, and moves with some kind of causal relationship. And one way to think about this is called and, but, therefore. This comes from Randy Olson. Houston, we have a narrative, so it's all about why science needs story. And the way ABT works is very simple. And is a couple statements at the beginning about the current state, something we can all agree on. But introduces the change. So this is something new that happens. It might be an event, it might be a decision, it might be a sudden obstacle. And then therefore is the result of that. So either a natural consequence of the but, or a decision or action that you're taking as a result of the but. So here's what it sounds like. There are millions of people across the US that suffer from chronic back pain. And this is one of the leading causes of absenteeism and causing billions of dollars of lost productivity and direct medical costs every year. But current drug treatments have a lot of side effects, and they have addictive potential, and they stop working after a while. Therefore, we have created a new neurostimulation device that treats chronic back pain at its source so that we can get people off pain drugs. That is ABT in a nutshell, and it works for virtually everything. In fact, Randy Olson will tell you he did not invent ABT. That actually goes to the South Park guys. So Trey Parker and Matt Stone gave a series of writers' workshops a number of years ago where they introduced ABT as a concept. And they have a simple rule for a South Park episode that every single beat of the story has to advance through a but or a therefore. This is what keeps story moving. Now, if you're not a South Park fan, you can actually go back a little farther. And this is Hegel, this is Aristotle, this is thesis, antithesis, synthesis. This is problem solution. This is very foundational story structure. And it's foundational because it works with the way our brain likes to think. Now we can contrast this with what we call the and structure. You all know this. This is what I call the what I did for summer vacation structure. We all wrote this essay in 4th grade. First, I went to Disney World, and we went on the slide, and then I got ice cream, and then I had a fight with my sister, and then we went and got dinner. Bless all those 4th grade teachers reading all of those essays. They are very boring. And structure is not only boring, but it's also not memorable. And it's not memorable, again, because we don't have the causal relationships, the hooks that make a story stick in your brain. We're not working with the way the brain likes to receive information. And yet, almost every scientific abstract you've ever read is written in and format. So why is this? Because in STEM fields in particular, academia beats the and, but, therefore out of you. We think of and as being neutral, unbiased, objective. And so you have these stories from scientists and others in technology in particular that go, we did this, and we did that, and we did this other thing, and we got result A, and we got result B. But you can tell that same story in an ABT format without losing any scientific accuracy, without introducing bias. It's simply restructuring the same information in a way that allows people to receive it. So we've restructured this one now in an ABT format. And again, this is not about cherry-picking data. It's not about bias. It's not about dumbing down the science. Because I can do this. I can introduce the ABT up front and then continue on. Now that I've established those cognitive hooks, you're ready to care about the rest of the information. So ABT is very powerful this way. A couple things I do want to note. This is about structure. It is not about language per se. So it doesn't mean that every single time you have to literally use the words and, but, and therefore. It might be additionally, however, and as a result. Might be a yet and a so. It might even just be implied by the structure of the story itself. But when you start looking at good story, you're going to see that ABT throughout there. The other thing I want to tell you is that this works at multiple levels. So it works at a sentence level or paragraph level. It also works at a whole piece level. If you think about every case study that you've ever read that starts with a situation and a challenge and a solution and a result, that is essentially an ABT format. That problem, solution, result format, right, is ABT in a nutshell. The other thing that's very cool about ABT is it builds on each other. So you can have multiple ABTs moving a story forward. So you know this story. So, little girl, stepmother, ball, glass slipper, you know every beat of this story. And what I want to point out here is that every beat of this story is a but, therefore, turn. So we see, but always introduces a turn in the story, up and down. So father dies, therefore stepmother. Invitation to the ball, can't go, therefore sad. But fairy godmother, but lost the slipper, but the prince comes after her. Every single turn is a but, therefore turn. And why am I standing up here talking about Cinderella when we're here to talk about science? Because it's the same story. This story structure works very well for talking about an innovation. So we have here a neurodegenerative disease. We have a small molecule treatment, but it fails safety testing. Now we have a new biologic that we've developed as a result, but that biologic can't get across the blood-brain barrier. Therefore, we need to invent a new delivery mechanism to get across that blood-brain barrier. And now that we've done it, voila, now we have new hope for Parkinson's disease. This is a story of innovation. It's the same story structure because ABT is universal story structure. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. You can put it into an ABT format. And again, it's going to be much more engaging for your audience. And again, this is very important when you are making that shift, whether it's a pitch deck, a brochure, patient information, whatever it is that you need to do when you're leaving the world of academia, when people are no longer literally being paid to read the words that you have written, you need to give them a story structure. So now, we're going to move to talk from story to brand.
Thank you.
I'll give you that.
Thank you. I'm going to take some time to show you now how you can use a story across the life cycle of your brand, across different touch points. We're going to start with brand communication. We're not going to be talking about marketing or advertising or corporate communication. We're going to start at the core of your organization where whether you be a solopreneur or 100 employees, the goal with your brand and your essential story is to create alignment around purpose, around vision, so everybody's going forward in the right direction, and whomever is communicating your story, is it doing it from the same place and to be consistent. A lot of organizations out there will have a marketing and messaging, an ad campaign, and have an internal meeting, and it's not really coming from the same profile or the same soul of the organization. So your story should not be rewritten every touch point that you have. It is a moment that you can expose your story to your audience. So we want to show how your story can become a system. At Genetica, when we help organizations create a brand or reposition a brand, we go through our process of discovery. We take them, we do key stakeholder interviews to learn what's going on amongst the internal team within their four walls. We talk to folks outside their four walls, clients, partners, research partners, to see how they perceive. And we also look at the competition. We then write the essential story from that. So your essential story takes these into account when you write it, what Laura also described, these into account, but also its brand lives in 3 states. The past, the present, and the future should all be part of your story. Where are you coming from? Where are you today? How are you going to change the future? Using the ABT structure. Here is a fictitious company that we created. This is what you would, typically see is an essential story is no longer than what you see right here, okay? So this is a respiratory medtech drug device company. They're focused on chronic respiratory disease, right? And their breakthrough is that this device adapts each patient's breathing pattern in real time. And this is how we want to tell the story. This is their umbrella. It should resonate with everybody that reacts with it. But this is more of an internal document. And you can see here their ABT is in bold. Every day, millions of people living with chronic respiratory disease rely on inhaled therapies to manage their condition. Yet, despite advances in medicine, outcomes remain inconsistent. So what do? We developed a precision inhalation platform that adapts to each patient's breathing in real time. What do we do with this? Now we have to take this and make it mean something to your audiences. We have to target this messaging to your internal stakeholders and your external stakeholders. We call it a message map. How do we map it out so it resonates to your multiple audiences? It's always coming from one core story. That never changes. So at the center of your storytelling, you have your essential story, and then you map out the values to each of your audiences. We're skipping a lot of tools here, actually, that we would go through, but we wanted to give you a visual example. The QR codes that you have on the card, also on the screen, you can go to that landing page and download these tools with thought starters and everything so you can go through these exercises here. Your brand lives internally as well as it does externally. Before you go out and try to sell something or raise money, you have to make sure everybody internally is aligned around what you do, what your values are, what you stand for. So you have your internal audiences. It could be the leadership. It could be the associates. It could be board members and advisors. Your external audiences are going to shift depending on where you are in the life cycle of your organization, but it may start with, for a med device or a therapeutic, gene therapy, investors and strategic med tech partners, clinicians, specialists in the field, in patients with chronic respiratory disease. When we target the message to each of these audiences, we're not changing the story. We're changing the emphasis and language that they can understand that makes it meaningful for them. So for the investors, what do they want to hear? They want to hear it's a platform for future of respiratory delivery. Okay, now I'm listening. What are the clinicians and specialists? What do they want to hear? They want to hear this is much more precise delivery than what you're using now, and it's more predictable outcomes. That resonates with them. And then when we talk to the patients, they want to know they can have confidence in every breath by utilizing this. It still comes from the same place, but now you are catering it or targeting it, translating it to your audience. Well, how do you do that? Working backwards, you need to know who your audience, who they are to begin with. So you have to create some type of target audience persona. In digital marketing, they call it avatars. That's when you get into the mind of your audience. What do they value? What do they believe? What will make them move? What's their anticipated state of mind when you engage with them? When you're doing sales enablement and you're engaging with a clinician, what are they thinking about when you're trying to sell the device? When you're going to investors, what are they thinking about and how do you address that? This is what a target audience persona could look like. This is a clinician. This is Priya. She's a female, though balanced representation in the field. She's 42 years old. She has 10 to 20 years experience. This is what her focus is. This is a technical device. This is a med device. Her technology exposure, she uses these systems daily, but she may be skeptical of new things. What are her goals and values? She wants better outcomes for her patients. She wants something that's risk adverse. She wants to reduce the risk, right? Knowing the state of mind, she's skeptical of new devices without strong data. So you know what she's already thinking when you're going to either sell to her or put a message in a brochure to her. And then other trigger points that are going to move this individual into action. We know what our story is. We know who our audience is. We've been able to translate our message to be the most impactful for our audience. How long does this work for us? It works through the life cycle of your organization. You will pivot, you will mature, so you'll have to have more information, but it should be coming from the same place. So how do you do that? You take your story, and let's say a med device. There's 5 stages. Your early startup, you came up with a novel concept, and what's our name? What do we do? Stage 1, let's define your vision, let's stand out. Let's write your essential story, let's write your message map. First application is the investor deck, and then we need to apply this information to a website. You move into preclinical, now let's start shaping the story based on your evidence. Let's beef up our stakeholder communications, let's rework our pitch material, all the way down to scaling whether you IPO, whether you want to expand with the market. Again, it is all coming from the same place within your essential story. Just the way that you translate and adapt it will mature over time.
Okay. So we're going to move on to the Q&A section at this point. But again, we've got a QR code that will take you to a website where you can download the tools and resources that Andrew talked about. It'll also list our sources here. So there were probably a lot more sources. Andrew knows I read like 30 books preparing for this because, again, that's the kind of nerd I am. But these are the 5 that you're going to find most interesting if you like to geek out about this stuff like I do. Go to the website, download the tools that Andrew's put together for you there, and you will find tools for working through your value shift, your ABT, your essential story, and the start of the messaging map. And we encourage you to start there, and if you have further questions, give us a call.
Cool. All right, let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you.